Well, joining us now, we have Bruce Harrison, who is tracking those developments for us from Seoul, and Nancy Snow, who's a professor of public diplomacy at Kyoto University, but is joining us from New York. Bruce, let's start with you. How far are we into these talks right now? What progress, if any, has there been?
Well, it's the second day of talks at this point, but we don't really have a good idea about what kind of progress has been made towards Moon's priority, as his office has said, which is to restart stalled talks between the United States and North Korea. We heard from both leaders yesterday after their meeting through their respective offices saying that they hope there is bold progress made. Moon Jae-in saying he hopes that he can offer a gift to all 80 million people on the Korean Peninsula based on the results of these talks. But specifically when it comes to denuclearization, we didn't get much out of the first meeting. As you said, Kilmeny, they are in their second meeting right now, and ostensibly the focus is on getting Washington and Pyongyang to start talking again. I think the big question is, what can President Moon offer Kim Jong-un to perhaps grease the wheels and make sure that there is progress on denuclearization, there is progress in restarting these stalled talks. A lot of speculation regarding whether that could be potentially economic exchanges between the two Koreas to incentivize Kim Jong-un. But frankly, it's hard to say, and we're just waiting to see whether or not they do come out today with some sort of declaration or statement regarding the stalled discussions between Washington and Pyongyang.
Bruce, how likely is it that we could see any kind of breakthrough with these talks?
Well, as I said there briefly, I think the big question is, what can Moon Jae-in do in this specific meeting? He hasn't offered a clear roadmap about how he's going to reach Kim Jong-un in regards to this impasse. He has billed himself as a mediator between the U.S. and North Korea. He has been very frank and said that ultimately peace can only be achieved on the Korean Peninsula. Denuclearization can only happen if the U.S. and North Korea reach an agreement, and then he needs to play a role in between those two countries. But he hasn't specifically said what he can do at this time. President Donald Trump earlier this year criticized President Moon on and off again for not being hard enough on North Korea, this and that, last year as well. But more recently, he's been very supportive of the president and his upcoming, well, now holding his third summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, saying he hopes for great results. So I think people are looking to Moon to make some sort of progress. But as I mentioned before, whether that's inter-Korean exchanges, economic incentives, it's hard to say who he's going to be able to convince to move first. Is the U.S. going to ease sanctions and grant North Korea a peace treaty to end the war, or is North Korea going to provide more proof it's actually dismantling its nuclear weapons facilities? That's hard to say.
Okay, over to you, Dr. Snow. Some in the U.S. have been a bit skeptical of this summit. Senator Lindsey Graham thought that it might undermine efforts by Secretary of State Pompeo and U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, to really pressure the North to denuclearize. Does this summit frustrate the process for Washington?
I don't think so at all. This is a really important third step. This is now the third meeting that these two have had. And really, when you go back to when Moon first won his election, he has been focused diligently on trying to improve inter-Korean relations. Washington is always going to have its say, but you don't want to have too many cooks in the kitchen here. And right now, the pageantry and the excitement was really on display early. There's a nostalgia built into these meetings. I think that there will be some momentum coming out of this, and undoubtedly President Trump will want to have his time in the spotlight again. The only worry I have is actually that this joint statement will be too general, and that will really subject it to more criticism, just as we saw in Singapore when the joint statement from Trump and Kim really sort of lacked much punch regarding the denuclearization. I think when it comes to the peace process, we have to be very patient. We have to see a lot of confidence building measures. And it is certainly correct to mention exchanges, whether it's arts exchanges, sports diplomacy, These will be critical person-to-person exchanges now, and also getting the world increasingly involved in not only looking in from the outside, but also taking an interest in the history and culture of these two. They really see themselves more as kind of brothers in this process, and that's why Washington has a significant role to play. But these 3 days should be critical for these two countries on the peninsula.
And perhaps two other key players involved in this that are actually getting quite a bit of media attention are North Korea's first lady and Kim's sister. Talk to me a little bit about the role that they're kind of adding to this.
Well, they add a lot, certainly, and it was mentioned at the start when they greeted each other. I mean, the women have been prominent. Kim's sister was the breakout star. CNN even referred to her as the breakout star at the Winter Olympics. She's a critical player. She had that smile diplomacy when Vice President Mike Pence looked so stern at the opening ceremony. So all of these optics really come into play. Everybody's scrutinizing this, and there is a media and propaganda game that is ongoing. But the women so far have not really been the key players, but as far as providing a cordial, welcoming atmosphere, they are there. And I think Kim's sister is very, very clever and very astute and very important to this process. We just don't know that much about her.
Absolutely. Dr. Nancy Snow joining us from New York, and Bruce Harrison in Seoul. Thank you both.